Hi there, very good evening. Come back again. Welcome back to this advanced research methods. Tonight, the session is the data collection. So throughout, we have been learning how to do this research and what a research problem is about, and the time horizon, qualitative, quantitative approaches, the inductive, deductive, all these things we have done. Now, if you want to solve a problem, we need some data. We need some, in other words, I would call it for now, information. I think data is not information, in fact, but let me use that word to make you understand. For now, let me call it information. So we need certain information. Now, if you want to find out a solution to cure this COVID, we need to have some information. If you want to find out this economic downturn due to this lockdown of countries, we need to have some information. And how to come out of these COVID or of these lockdown or travel restrictions, we need some information. We need to have an exit strategy. We need to have a strategy to move the country on and so on. So we need information on this. So because these are all research problems, how to solve these economical issues, how to solve this economical downturn, and how to solve this COVID impact, how to treat these people, how to bring this economy back again to normal and so on. These are problems and we need information. In other words, I would call data. So we need to know this type of data we have and the sources of this data and how do we collect those and stuff. So that is what the topic tonight. Let's have a look at it. Now, when we call it data or information, we have two types. One is the primary data and the secondary data. Before I discuss these two, let me explain what data is about and what information is about. The data is this. I remember before you register for this free course, all of you were asked to register online, and we collected your data. We asked your name, we asked your addresses, maybe we asked your date of birth, maybe we asked your mobile number, we collected certain things. These are all data, and every single one of you have given this This is what I'm calling data. It is already collected. Now, this data will become, say, data male, the other one said female, the other one said male, and another one said, I have 40 applications here. And all 4 and you said the gender of you. So I know out of these 40 people, how many, let's say, individually, of the participation of these different genders, I just together and do some process. There was an interruption. Can you please bear with me? Let me upload the documents. Right. I'm sorry about the interruption, the technology. So now, when I process the genders of each and every applicant, I come across with 50% of them are males, 50% of them are females. Let me take another example. I collected all of your addresses. Now, when I get these address, when that says at the end of it, some of you would say Sri Lanka, some of you would say Qatar, some of you would say Dubai, some of you would say India, and so on. So I individually know where you are coming from when I look at your data. When I put those together, I can say about 10% of the students are coming from Sri Lanka, 13% is from India, 15% is from Dubai, and the rest of the population is coming from Belgium. So when I process these individually, I get a trend where these students are coming from. That is what I'm calling information. Let me take another example here. When I take your mobile number, when I take your phone number, you would give your phone number. Based on the phone number, I can find out whether you are from Vodafone, whether you are from 3Mobile, whether you are from Dialog or local countries' mobile network providers. So I can find out. And all of you would give me the number based on the front digits. I can find out which network you are coming from. And individually, I know which network you're using. When I put those all together, I can say 10% of my students are using Dialog, 25% of them are using Vodafone, 35% is using 3Mobile, and the rest of them are using Mobitel, something like that. Now, when I take this, when I process this, I'm getting this trend. The trend is what I'm calling the processed message is what I'm calling information. These informations are useful. You can do lots of application of it. Let me explain that to you as well. Now, let's say, just in case, if I get about 50% of the people are using one of the popular networks, maybe let's call it Dialog. So 50% of the students are using Dialog, and 30% of the students are using Airtel, and the remaining 20% of them are using Mobitel. So I have information, 50% of my students are using Dialog, 30% is using Mobitel, and 20% is using Airtel. So in that case, the application of this or the usage of this information is this. When I promote this course for the next batch, which network do I use to send some SMS marketing? And I would decide in my company, I would decide, let me use the Dialog, because most of my students are using Dialog network. So let me send some SMS marketing to them so that I can get the students to study on the next batch. That is one approach. And another company would apply this in a different way, that last time we sent SMSs to Dialog. That is why in this batch, there are so many Dialog users. And this time, let me send this to Mobitel. That is a different application. Now, two companies use the same information to apply this in different two ways, and one of them would work, the other one wouldn't. Otherwise, both of them wouldn't, or otherwise, both of them would. We don't know. This is where the companies make mistake. All of us, we have the same information in most of the time. Some of us, some of the times, we don't have the right information. That is fine. Sometimes, or most of the times, we have the right information. One information for everyone, but people make different approaches to apply those information to get something done, where we make mistakes. My message here is this: collecting data is this. If you process that, you get information. Those information can be applied to get some business decisions. If your employees are leaving, take 10 employees and speak to them why you are leaving. They say certain reasons, and those are all data. You put them together, you process it, and you find out 80% of the employees are leaving for this reason. 20% of them are leaving for this reason, so that we can solve this, solving these two reasons. That is why, or that is how you solve your problem. So I hope that you know the difference between data, and the processed data will be information, and how it is applied as well. Let me go further to explain this: the primary data and the secondary data. The primary data and the secondary data is simply this. Primary data is about the data you collect then and there when you need to know. The secondary data is about the data, it is already collected, but you use it for a purpose now. That is secondary data, simply. Another example, the primary data is directly coming from something happening now or from someone's brain directly. The secondary data was already collected on something happened, or maybe someone collected it from someone and it is available to you. Let me take an example to exemplify this as well. Now, I said I collected your data to study the mobile phone users, the same example. In that case, I already collected your numbers in the application when we asked you to register, and those are all available to us, so it is already collected. We in fact collected those data for a reason. It is because to contact you when the classes are studying is happening, we had to send you the Zoom link to participate in the class. For that reason, we collected it. Okay, so it's already collected. If I use that data for the same purpose or for a different purpose this time, it is what we call secondary data because it was collected. And you can use that for the same reason now to use it, or maybe you can use it for a different reason. In the sense, last time I collected that, in fact, to send you the Zoom meeting link. Now I'm using that to find out which is the popular network among my students so that I can mark out this course for the next batch. So I'm using it for a different reason. This is what we call secondary data because already collected, I'm using it. Your gender already collected, your address is already collected, your previous qualification already collected. So if I use it for a reason to get some information out of it, that is what we are using secondary data. The primary data is this. I don't have such things, and I'm asking you now. Then in our form, maybe we asked you the address, but we didn't ask the nationalities. You may have an address in a country where you are not the national of it. Maybe you are living in Qatar, but you may be from India. So your address is a Qatari address and your nationality is Indian. Now, we never asked that nationality in the form. If I want to know the nationality for a reason now, if I ask you, what is your nationality? That is what I'm calling primary data because I'm collecting it right now from you directly, primary data, right? So this is the understanding, primary data and the secondary data. These two data or these both data are useful in many terms. It has its plus and the minus. Primary data is good in one term and it is not right in some other term. Secondary data is good in one term and in some other term it may be not. So it has the positivity and the negativity both. And let's see what it is. Now, I have already given the message, by the way, let me go again. So the secondary data is about the existing data, right? We have records, reports, logs, journals. These are, we can get them, we can process them, we can build some information. That is secondary. The primary is about this. You get it from the people, from the participant, from the volunteers, from the parents, from the teachers, from the customers, from the employees, from the patients, wherever, whatever you want to know, you directly collect that from the people. That is primary. Or otherwise, you can do it this way as well. Some pictorial reports. If you have some pictures of some incident, using that and you get some data from that at that point, that is primary. You are collecting it. And you can do some observation on videos, photographs, on some events, some artworks. These are all primary because looking at that one, you are collecting it immediately, then and there, whenever you wanted it to study something. That is primary. Okay, so it has a limitation secondary. Let me discuss one or two. The age of the secondary data. If the data is too old. Now, if you want to study something on this COVID, we can use some secondary data on the symptoms of those. Now, the COVID has the variants. The data we collected 1 year ago on this doesn't apply these days because we are not talking about COVID-19. We are talking about COVID variants, some of the different things. So the data you collected in the past doesn't apply because the relevancy, the completeness, the age of it, the differences, that is the reason why. So some primary data. Otherwise, let's say if it is about a gender, that is okay because the gender never changes that way within 1 or 2 years time unless you change it purposely otherwise, right? So you can use that, but in some cases it is not, it doesn't apply. So that's a limitation. And the mobile number, again, some of you may be the customer of some company or some network providers, and that may change your mobile number totally may change. You may leave this country and you may go some other country, go to some other country where the number changes. So the age of the data. So that is the weakness of this. But it has the positivity as well. It's so cheap. Now, let's say if I want to know the gender trend of my students, if I can use the previously collected data, that is so easy, straight away available to me. I need to go to the LMS or the MIS, Management Information System, and find out how many students, what are the gender of them. Immediately, within 1 or 2 clicks, I get the data. But if I want to collect it primarily, it is also possible, and I have to speak to all these 40 students one by one. Hello, what is your gender? Hello, can I speak to you? What is your gender? They're going to ask me so many questions. Why the hell you want to know it now? So problem. So primary data is useful in some term. Sorry, secondary data. The primary data is this. It has some limitation because, you know, when you want to collect data, it is an art collecting data. There are experts, they collect data, and there are, my idea is, if you want to collect data, using an expert is the right way, but we are all learning to collect data now. So the second may be beneficial in that term, whereas the primary data we collect, it is not done by an expert this time, so it may be the money as well. So using secondary data may be beneficial in some term, and that is it. Okay, so we know about data, and we know about the types of data and plus and minus of these both two types. Now let's see how we can collect this data. As I told you, we can use application forms to collect data. We can use experiments, you know, very simple. I explained this in a different class earlier. We can do let's say find out whether this COVID vaccine is working, you can do an experiment. How is it now? How is it now? Can one of you confirm the quality, please? How is it now? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Is this?
Yes, now it's okay.
Right, thank you. I'm sorry. Let me repeat again what I said. That's a technology that is beyond my control anyway. I'll try my best. Right, thank you, Mr. Right, thank you. We have instruments, we have tools to collect. Experiment is one of them. The experiment, when I call it experiment, when we talk about this COVID, now we have vaccines here. So to test whether this vaccine is the right one, if it is giving immunity, you can do an experiment, call 100 people and inject the vaccine and observe them. So we can do observation, right? And we can do experiments as well. So we can, that is going together. We do this and we can find out whether this is okay. Or we can do interviews, asking questions. That when I'm calling it interview, let's say I can ask, what is your mobile number? What is your address, and how do you feel about this vaccine? Interview questions, it may be, how do you feel? Are you comfortable? What painful or how painful it is, and how curing it is? Are you confident now? So are you ready to take the second dose or third dose? Things like that. These are all questions we can. So we can say, out of these people, these 100 people we studied, 80% of them, they're ready to take the second vaccine because they're happy. And 20 people, they would say, let me think about it that way. That is a studies. Or in some other case, let's say, the government is saying that out of these deaths in here, most of the deaths, 80% of the death is beyond it's because it has caused the people beyond 60 years, 60 and above years old. So that is one trend they have done. That's why they are prioritizing people 60 and above to give the vaccine immediately to cure the people, to protect the people from this. These are all done in the past. So we can do experiments in this case, we can do interviews in this case, okay? And we can use testimonials of people. When they have written some testimonials, based on the testimonials we can study. Let's say, for example, if you want to study some course from a university, this university has testimonials of students. And you take about 15 testimonials and study all of those and see what they testimonials are, what are these, the opinion of these students they have already passed out from, or some other, that is testimony. And we can do tests, exams, and find out what it is. I'm sorry, interruption again. Let me upload it. Right. Okay. So the data collection instrument. So we talked about experiments here already, and we talked about interviews. Let me speak on this interview once again. So the interview is part of this. Now, let's say you might see these televisions, these radios, all these channels these days. They're doing interviews about this. These impact of COVID, the vaccination issues, or maybe this economical downturn, economical impact of this, and the people with these day-to-day living people's contacts, and all these things. It is done through interviews. If you take one interview, it may be a data. If you take 5 interviews and analyze all of these 5 interviews and find out something common, some trend out of it, it may be the information we are getting. So this interview can happen face-to-face. This is useful for you to collect data, and it can be done for one personnel or maybe a focus group. Let's say if you want to speak something on this COVID, you have to focus some experts in this, maybe some set of doctors, some members of doctors they're treating this pandemic, or some nurses they know about this, or some scientists they're studying about this viral fever or things like that. So we can use this focus group, and then we use open-ended items in here. When I'm calling this, I would be discussing about how to make your question to speak to people to collect data. That is coming next week. But let me tell you one thing. I ask open-ended, some question they ask close-ended. Let me tell you one. The open-ended question is simply this. If I ask you, what is your gender? That is open-ended question. And if I ask you, if I ask you this way, what is your gender? And I give you an option, 2 options, male or female, that is a closed-ended. If I leave the question open without any answers, any options, we call it open-ended. And if I give you an answer for it, this is closed-ended. The reason is, if I ask you, what is your gender? I would get more than 2 answers. One of you would say, I'm a female. One of you would say, I'm a male. And one of you would say, I'm a transgender. There are different genders these days. So you would get more than 1 answer, more than the expected answers if it is an open question. And if it is a closed-ended, if I say either female or male, you would pick one of those, otherwise you would leave it blank. That is when we call the closed-ended. And it has the plus and the minus anyway, because if I ask someone, she is neither male nor female, and if I only give these 2 answers to that question, I'm going to collect the wrong data here to analyze. So that I'll be discussing later. However, the open-ended questions are working like this in unstructured or in-depth interviews. Let me discuss that. The unstructured interviews are this. Let's say if you have an open-ended question to ask from an interview to collect some data, when you ask a question, that guy would answer something. And based on that answer only, you ask the next question. And then again, based on the answer of that question, you would ask the third question. That is when we call unstructured, because you didn't have the exact question what you wanted to ask. You come up with some basic questions, 5 or 6 basic questions, and you ask the first question. On that answer, that question, and come back to the second question you have in your piece of paper, and you ask that question. Based on that, you ask the second, third, fourth, fifth, and 25th question. And again, you come to the third question of you. Let me explain this an example with, let's say, you're sitting with some person in the bus when you're traveling to some other destination, where you say hello to the person sitting next to you, and then he says hello, hi. And you ask him, where are you coming from? You just wanted to know where the guy is coming from. When he says, I'm from Colombo, you would ask, which part of Colombo? Then he would say, I'm from Vellavada. Then you ask him, which part? Then he says, I'm in Rudramavada. Then you ask him, do you know the guy is living next to this? And he's my friend. So now look at this. You only wanted to know where the guy is coming from. Based on the answers you gave, you remembered your friend and you asked him. And he said, he's also my neighbor. I know him very well. Then you ask him, what is he doing, and so on. The question goes on and on. And stop that question and you come to the next question. Maybe, did you get any COVID vaccine? And from that point, you go further and further again. And then again, you come to the third question. This is what we are calling unstructured, because you had 2 or 3 or 5 questions, the basic questions you have in your mind to collect some data, but when you get some answers from the respondents, you would get some instant questions there. So then you ask further. So you get more understanding of it. This is what we call unstructured interview. You ask questions which you never intended, because based on the answers he gave you, you wanted to know something more. The structured question is this. You have the question in hand, and it is most of the times goes for one personnel, and then it may be open-ended or maybe close-ended, but you never ask any question based on the answer he gave. You ask, where are you coming from? And that is the end of that question. What is your age? What are you studying? You never ask, what is your age and why didn't you get married at this age? You never ask that question, because based on the question. If you ask, it will become an unstructured question. Now let's say if you want to study the COVID vaccine development, you want to develop this COVID vaccine. In that case, can you ask a structured question? I don't think so. You need to ask a question, and based on the answer the patient or the survivors or the doctors give, you have to ask another question, and then again that will lead to another question. So the question goes on and on until you get some clear understanding. This is what we call longitudinal. This is where you develop a new theory. So if you want to develop such things, if you want to do a PhD research, you always do unstructured, meaning you have 5 or 6 basic questions. Based on those questions, you would ask many questions then and then, whatever the questions you feel like to know to solve your problem. So that is what the interview is about. And the focus group interview is simply this. You focus on 5 to 15 people, and you can study those people, whoever you think that they are the people. When I'm using the word focus group, let's say you want to develop vaccine now. Is it okay to speak to a businessman to find out the vaccine, the data to develop your vaccine? The wrong focus, the wrong group. So you had to focus on the right group. That is when we call it. You focus on particular personnel and particular set of people so that you can solve your problem, getting some information from them, some data from them. Observation, obviously we know, and questionnaire. The questionnaire is this. You write the question in a piece of paper or maybe online, and you send that to the intended audience so that they'll answer it, and you get the data from them and you analyze it and you understand why it is or what it is. This is what questionnaire. In questionnaire, you most of the times give the close-ended, meaning you give the answers as well. It doesn't mean that you can't have open-ended question. If you have open-ended question, they would give you some answer, and then based on that answer, you may want to know something further, but you have no option because they have answered that question and they have sent that back to you, and they are not in connection with you anymore. Because most of the times you collect data in anonymity condition. An example would be, if you want to find out the feelings of this vaccine, you ask some people. If they want to reveal something that they really experience, they don't want the people to know who they are. So they would answer those in anonymity conditions. So you tell them that that's part of your research ethics anyway. You tell them that we've never reveal who you are. Please tell the experience of this. So they would tell you this, and you forget. So you never have the question and the answer with you, and you don't know who answered it. So if you want to know further on that later, you won't be able to find the right guy or the same guy again. So it will be most of the time a closed-ended question to do this. And the self-administrated, when I'm calling it questionnaire, sometimes it is possible for you to go and sit down with the respondents to read the question. You read the question and they would answer the question. And the self-administrated is this: you send the question to them, they read that and they understand it. It depends again. Some people, they are the respondents you want to know. Let's say you want to know something about this COVID and you want to speak to someone, the guy doesn't understand your language. So that you may have to go and sit down and explain the question, read the question, explain the question, and get the answer, what he answers. So you need to go and sit down with him. But the crowd you may be looking at for some other different issue, you may get a person, he would be able to understand your wordings of the question. So it's just a matter of sending the question to them, and they would have a look at it and they would answer it and they'll send it back to you. So self-administration. Now the final message of the night, which is the triangulation. When I'm discussing this, research data collection and the data collection instruments, you would have found out the plus and the minus of primary and the secondary, and you would have found out the plus and the minus of interviews, the experiments, and whatever the different types of questionnaires, structured, unstructured, close-ended, open-ended, observation, experiment, all these things you do, it has its plus and the minus. Okay, so you never use one of these methods because it is convenient to you. We never do that, because the reason is we are not here to do what is convenient to us, but we do to solve the problem. So we have to do what it takes. So if you want to solve this, you may have to use both of these data sometime, the primary data and the secondary data. And you may have to do some interviews, structured interviews and unstructured interviews sometimes. You may have to do some experiments also. Now, you see, if you want to develop this COVID vaccine, it is not enough for you to use only the secondary data. Primary is mandatory because the vaccine, the virus is variating these days. So we need to study the current trend as well. That is one thing. And on the other side, an interview would not be enough with this structured. You may have to do some unstructured as well. Fine. And it is not only enough to ask the people about this, you may have to do some experiments also. So we need to use all these methods, whatever that applies to collect the data to solve the problem. This is what we call triangulation. You take all of those like a triangle, use this method, number 1, number 2, number 3, and you work in the middle. Using all of those, get the data, analyze it, and solve your problem. So I think that is it from my end tonight. Thank you very much for joining me. And I would welcome all of your questions so we can answer those. Thank you. Be safe. Stay home. Very good night. And I see you next Sunday. Have a good week ahead. Thank you.